8 out of 10 times, once you talk through it, you end up with agreement of what's the best strategy. Not what was my strategy or what was somebody else's idea of the right strategy. You come up with collectively the best strategy.
Welcome to Work Inspired, a podcast where leaders in business, commercial real estate, technology, and design come together to discuss change, challenge, and opportunity in today's professional world. This show is powered by BOS, a leader in commercial interiors. The team of workplace experts at BOS is equipped and ready to help you navigate the path to your next workspace. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out in your career, you're gonna learn something new today. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and get ready to work inspired. On today's episode of Work Inspired, we're going to be talking about mini golf. Now that might sound like an interesting topic for a podcast like this one, but what you're actually going to hear is a great conversation around innovative ideas, around technology, around turning change into opportunity, and creating an incredible and memorable visitor and team member experience. We'll talk culture, we'll talk innovation, and we're gonna talk success. Today we've got CEO of Puttshack, Joe Vrankin, on the show, and we're going to have an incredible conversation. Work Inspired starts right now. Joe, thanks for being here. So excited to talk with you today.
Thanks for having me, George. Really appreciate it.
So let's just start by hearing your professional story. You've got a pretty, I think, exciting background. Some companies most of us have heard of that you've led. Tell me about your professional story.
Sure. So for the past over 20 years now, I've been in sports, leisure, social entertainment space. I spent 8.5 years as the chief operating officer for the Arena Football League. I spent 5 years as the chief executive officer of Topgolf. Have done a variety of things in between, and now I'm the CEO of Puttshack.
So you've had jobs that most of us wish we had, basically. Sounds like an exciting space to be in. Tell me a little bit about Puttshack. What makes it unique? What's the concept?
Sure. So Puttshack has reinvented the game of miniature golf. So miniature golf has been around forever, and really hasn't changed, right? But what most people think of when you think about miniature golf is you think of pirate ships and windmills and a lot of hokey stuff that's really designed for kids. What Puttshack has done that's really unique is it's the world's only high-tech miniature golf game. Okay, so we have a trackable, which is a patented technology. So what that allowed us to do is completely reinvent this game that everybody knows and design it and create it for a much broader audience. So what I mean by that is inside every golf ball, essentially you have a microprocessor and a battery system, which enables for GPS. So you essentially have kind of like a mini iPad within the golf ball. And so that's allowed us to do automatic scoring. So you never walk around with pencil and paper anymore. And you're playing a game that is designed very differently. So you're trying to get the highest score possible as opposed to the lowest score possible. All of the holes are designed for kind of our core demographic, which is that 21 to 39-year-old.
Okay.
Right? But it's accessible to everybody. So it's very accessible during the day to families and corporate events. But in the evening, the venue really transforms itself into a high-end nightclub feel. And so we have what we call our triple threat. Okay, so we have this great game, right? And it's reinvented what everybody knows, but targeted to an adult audience. Okay. And then we've wrapped around that some high-end casual dining with global flavors, and then curated signature cocktails, a full bar, and then the third component is really that guest service, which in hospitality today is really that probably the most difficult thing to actually execute on. But that's what ties it all together, and that's what really create something different and special that within the social entertainment space, I just don't think you see at the same level that we've been able to create.
I want to talk about that for sure, but let's take a step back and talk about the technology. So is there a connection between Topgolf and Puttshack? Is it the same type of sensor technology? Because Topgolf is kind of that electronic ball with the scoring as well, right?
Yeah. So There are, the similarity is the exact same identical twin brothers that invented the game of Topgolf invented the game of Puttshack.
Oh,
okay, there's no connection from the corporations and the companies themselves. And what happened is the Steve and Dave Jolliffe, who created the game, when they were no longer really involved day to day with any Topgolf stuff, they stepped back and said, "Hey, can we reinvent this game of miniature golf?" And what they did is they started looking at new technology that didn't exist back when they created Topgolf, right? So they're both technology based, which is one of the things that has created such an advantage within our space. But it uses completely different technology.
Oh, cool.
So, with Topgolf, you have to be able to hit a driver and use it with a full computer microchip and a battery system that we use within Puttshack. You could take a driver to it once, and then it really wouldn't work very well anymore.
That's cool. I think the concept is obviously awesome. I mean, it's scalable. It's something that is approachable for people that maybe aren't avid golfers, and then you wrap in the drinking, the eating, the hospitality aspect. I think it's a great idea. But let's talk about the experience of coming into a Puttshack, because that's something in the corporate world. We talk about employee experience, customer experience, and everybody's striving, especially now after the pandemic, to create a reason for people to leave their homes, right? So how do you think about customer experience, and what are kind of some of the key components of a successful one?
Sure. So we don't have customers, we have guests at Puttshack, because, and that's, there are little distinctions.
Yep.
But for us, it's important. We also don't have employees, we have associates and we have team members. And again, some people may think that not overly important, but the reality is it is, right? A guest is somebody you would invite into your home, right? You wouldn't invite a customer into your home, right? And we work alongside of everybody who works with us, which is why we consider them associates and team members. So, having done this for a while and really looking at, hey, how do you create something that's special? How do you create something that's different, that guests will really resonate to and associates want to be a part of, right? One is we are very blessed that we have this game of Puttshack that you can only play with us, right? And because we have a patent technology around it, that creates a barrier of entry so somebody can't just come in and try to replicate it, okay? But for long-term success within, I think, the social entertainment space, it has to be balanced, right? So a lot of concepts either have they really focus on the activity component, or they focus on the food component, and then they kind of just throw in some activities. I think part of the formula to get it right is you have to balance those two, right? So we started with this great game, but then we brought on our head of food and beverage, who is a French-trained executive chef who has been in the high-end casual dining space for a long time, and really creating a menu that when people walk out, they're like, okay, the game was great, but oh my God, the food was so much better than I was expecting, right? And today, especially with social media, he spends as much time creating signature cocktails as he does a signature food dish.
Wow.
Right. So you wouldn't expect to come into a Puttshack and find grilled octopus on the menu, but you do. And people are like, wow, that by itself blows them away. Then you get to the signature cocktails that also have some theatrics to it and really helps get people engaged. And they weren't expecting that. The third component, which we touched on, which is really getting associates who are engaged and want to be a part of what we're creating and building and buy into the culture that we've established, because they tie all of that together, the game, the food, the drinks. The other thing that I think is unique about Puttshack, the other co-founder of the business is a guy by the name of Adam Breeden, who's been in social entertainment for a long time. And he has this real gift for design and creation of the lighting and part of really creating an experience that's totally, where people can be totally immersed in what they're doing, is hitting every sensor that you can. So it's visually within how the courses are designed, it's the lighting, it's the sound. We have a curated mix, sound music playlist that is tailored to every market. So what you will hear in Chicago is not going to be the same that you hear in Atlanta or the same that you hear in London.
Smart.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to recognize that it isn't just one thing. There are some important elements that you need to bring in together. And they all have to have an important component, like they have to have an important weight associated with it in order for it to really tie together. The other part is, okay, now if you can pull all that together, you now have something that, quite frankly, I don't think if you look at our space, too many places have been able to actually accomplish, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's not rocket science, right? Like have a great activity, really good food and beverage. When people walk in, they go, wow, I wasn't expecting this in miniature golf, right? And a great guest experience, right? It's not like I'm reinventing the wheel. Those are kind of pretty core things within a lot of businesses, right? But to actually pull all of those together is really hard.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is to continuously be innovating, continuously be improving. How can we make it better? How can we do more so that our guests never get tired of coming back?
Yeah, I think the balance thing is very well said. I mean, like you're right. It doesn't seem like rocket science, but to find that right kind of mix of all of those things and where you're putting your resources and where you're tweaking and how does the sound interact with the sight and even the scent. And I mean, mixology alone, you talked about signature cocktails or craft cocktails. I mean, that's a full-time profession. I should know. I worked in the liquor industry. It's, when I think about all of those components, and you guys are in a number of different locations, I think with some pretty aggressive expansion plans, how do you scale that? You talked a little bit about the unique differences, but can you take a guest experience or an associate experience and can you put kind of a recipe is overused, but can you put a real intentional process behind it so that you are increasing your chances for success when you open up a new store? Or
it's a great question. I mean, it's fundamental to any business that wants to be successful and scale. Right. So we believe that one of the most important things we did very early on is establish our brand and then build that into what our culture is going to be. Okay, because within hospitality, within a guest service industry where that guest interaction is so critical to what your brand is perceived as and people coming back, because that's the goal. It's not for them to come once, right? It's for them to go, hey, this is a place I want to continuously go to. So for us, it was creating that brand. And early on, I mean, what we're trying to accomplish, when I tell people we're trying to do something, including our investors, right? We're trying to do something that within social entertainment, nobody's ever done before. And what I mean by that is we're trying to create something that's really special and scale it in a pretty quick time frame.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Most companies early on don't focus on the brand because they're focused on seeing, hey, does this work? How you're just kind of scratching and clawing, you're wearing a million different hats. And then by the time you're 5 years in, you kind of get around to, well, what's our brand?
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Our vice president of ops, the first thing he said is, I need the branding because I can't build training materials unless I know what do we stand for? What are the key words? What are the things that are important to us?
Right.
And so when we brought on our chief marketing officer, we said, okay, your very first assignment is focus in on let's develop our brand, right? Like everybody has an idea after we open the first location, right? But let's define that now, right? Because then you're building the training materials that reinforce that brand and you're building the culture that goes with it. I think the culture component is so huge within our space, right? because you need people to buy into what it is you're doing. Who do you want to be, right? And own it and believe it, right? Now that's easy for me, right? As the CEO, if I don't believe in our culture, then quite frankly, we're sunk.
Yeah, right.
And it's pretty straightforward kind of at the central team. As you drill into the venues and you're working with people who, they may be doing this as a summer job at college, right? So to get them to buy into the culture and really embrace it so it's genuine, that's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to replicate.
Right.
So, the other part is continuing to develop our talent within so that, like as an example, we'll be opening up a venue in Miami later this year, and one of our group salespeople in Atlanta is being promoted to lead the group sales effort in Miami, right? So there's two things I love about that. One is we're developing the talent that works with us. The other is we have somebody who already believes in our culture, embraces our culture, going to a new venue to help replicate that. Because as you scale, that's one of the most difficult things to do is take those core components that people believe in at existing sites and then replicate that at new sites.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a marketing guy. I love that you're talking about brand and marketing as being so beneficial to the internal side of your business, which then clearly will translate to the external side and the guest experience. But you talk about training, you talk about culture, and we're in a time now coming out of the pandemic where I think, especially in your space, but in all spaces, it's very difficult to find people, right? To keep and to find talent. So that has been something that's been fundamental to the success at Puttshack, is making sure that the brand and the culture are strong so that people want to come work with you, that they want to stay as part of the team. They want to grow and create a career at your business. That's really cool. And I think that's something that when we thought about having you on the show and talking about technology, mini golf, restaurant experience, and translating it into our business, there's so many overlaps, because that's huge in the corporate space too, is creating an incredible culture so that people really believe in what they're doing and want to come work at your organization.
Yeah. As you said, everybody's experience, doesn't matter whether you're in the hospitality space, you're in manufacturing, you name it, right? It's so hard to find good talent these days, right? You could argue that it's always been hard to find really good talent, right? But I think that's been exacerbated since the pandemic has started. And so you want to find good people. You want a reason for them to want to be a part of your organization. And then you want to keep them. Right. You want people who are happy to be a part of what you're creating, because the reality is if you don't do that, they can go somewhere else very quickly and find it. We were very fortunate. At the start of the pandemic, we had 3 locations open in London. We had a team here in the U.S., but we hadn't yet opened our first venue. Okay, but it was still a difficult time, we had to close our 3 locations in London, and we didn't lose a single person in the U.S. We lost. There were a few people that we lost. On the London side, mainly because we were shut down and like everybody within hospitality had to make some changes. But when you talk about culture, we build off of kind of 4 main concepts, which we call our block. Right? Okay, so it's bring your A game, lead the way, own the fun, and care deeply. Right. So when the pandemic hit, I think with every company, if you say, hey, we really care about our associates, every company says that. Right. The key is when it's hard to actually follow through on that. Right. And so part of our reaction of caring deeply when the pandemic hit, and that, within our space, people within 72 hours let their entire teams go. Right. And we didn't do anything for 4 weeks. We go, listen, this is a shock to everybody, right? We need to be as supportive as we can to our teams. And then we need to assess kind of what's really going on. Let's kind of have a little bit of forecastable visibility, as it were, right? And then start making decisions, right? And I think that made a huge difference to our team because they all have colleagues and friends in hospitality that, on Friday the world shut down and on Monday they didn't have a job.
They weren't treated the same way.
Right. And so then when you go to bring people back, people remember.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They remember how easy it was for you to let them go when things got hard. And yet, as organizations, we ask a lot of our associates, right? I mean, especially within hospitality space, and I know there's a lot of other industries that have similar demands, right? Where you're working evenings, you're working weekends. I mean, that's just part of what hospitality is all about. And so you sacrifice a lot of personal things in order to be a part of that industry. And then there's going to be things that happen where, can you demonstrate those core traits that you say are fundamental to your business? Can you really live them?
Right. That's true. Being genuine and following through, it's often more easily said than done. And I think, and when did you start with Puttshack?
So I started in January 2019.
Okay, so 2019, so you had about a year, and then you had the pandemic. And then since then, we all know how we've all been living, and your industry, like ours, was one that was substantially impacted by not being able to be together. So you're fairly new at a company and in an, I think, pretty aggressive expansion planning mode. How did you handle the challenges that were brought about through 2020, 2021? And then kind of now that we're in 2022, I mean, I just had COVID 2 weeks ago. People are still getting it, but like, what do you guys, what's the forecast? Are you optimistic about people coming back together, that we're going to live with this now and that you guys can move forward with your aggressive plans for growth?
Sure. So the short answer is yes, we are optimistic. We're very bullish on Puttshack and our business and our growth and our strategy all along. I mean, we looked back and said, I put together a 5-year strategy when I came on board and said, okay, here's how we want to grow the business. Here's what we're doing that's different than what others in our industry have done at the same stage that we were at, right? And the first one is really making sure that we were well capitalized, okay? Having been involved in early stage and high growth businesses and for, a lot of my career, the biggest risk is you don't have the capital that you need, right? We were very fortunate. We went out to raise capital in 2019, and people really understood what we were doing. And so we were oversubscribed with how much money we were looking to raise. And I went back to the board and said, I think we should take more money, right? Now, that's always hard for founders because they're being diluted down, right? But they understood the reason for it. And so fortunately, 4 months later, the pandemic hit, and we have additional cash in reserve because as I said, it's not, our biggest risk isn't the things we can forecast and the challenges that we have of any early stage growth company. Our biggest risk is what we don't know. Right. So for us, that was one. The other is we invested in talent. Okay, so we, again, at the stage of our company, most companies kind of at our stage, you invest in the talent you can afford. Okay, so what I mean by that is, we had only had one location open in West London at the time I joined. And typically you would go, okay, well, let's test and see if this will work, make a few modifications, raise a little bit more money, open up another venue. And you kind of do that like 3 or 4 times. And then you go, okay, now we've got it down.
Sure.
Now let's raise our growth rates.
Yeah.
The challenge with that approach, which by the way, it's a fine approach, so there's nothing wrong with it. But there's the other side to that coin is you typically hire the senior talent you can afford at the time. So it won't be kind of somebody at a CFO experience level. It won't be somebody at a chief marketing officer experience level, right? It'll be a kind of a VP of finance, a director of marketing, kind of talent wise. And then when you go to say, okay, now we've got it, let's go, all in. A lot of times you're going, well, we have to upgrade to a CFO. We have to upgrade to a CMO.
Right.
And as we mentioned before, you can't go bring in a bunch of new senior people and not impact the culture. So everything that you were building foundationally now has another element where, okay, wait a second. So what we did and what the owners and the investors all believed in was talent isn't an expense, it's an investment. So let's bring in the talent that understands how to take us from the beginning all the way through our growth objectives. So we brought in somebody who is a real CFO.
Yeah.
Susan Walmsley, who's our chief marketing officer. I've known her since 2007 because she ran all of my marketing when I was the CEO at Topgolf, right? So she's grown and scaled a business before, right? We've done similar things on the operations side. So when the pandemic hit, we had a really seasoned team. They knew, okay, you know, a lot of them had been through, you know, the Great Recession because I was the CEO of another concept at that time, right? And a lot of them were with me. So we understood, okay, listen, there are some things that are going to be way out of your control that are major things. That helped us navigate through the pandemic. The other thing that we saw was within every challenge, there's usually an opportunity, right? And if you aren't 100% immersed in just kind of circling the wagons and trying to get through the crisis, and you have the ability to kind of say, okay, well, if there's an opportunity within there, what is it? And halfway through the pandemic, what we saw was an opportunity on the property side, right? Because social entertainment and experiential entertainment is really needed. I mean, I would argue that we are getting a benefit from kind of the fact that people are placing more value now on being with friends and family in an interactive, you know, way.
Right.
And so landlords and developers were seeing that too. So we saw that opportunity in the middle of the pandemic. We did something that most people didn't do, which was raise growth capital in the middle of that, because we're also very focused on saying we don't ever want to commit to a site that we know we don't have the money to build, right? Again, things that can get you in trouble when you're trying to scale. And so we saw the opportunity. We raised $63 million in the middle of the pandemic so that we could go and say, hey, we can build a pipeline so that as the pandemic ends, we're really scaling and ramping. And fortunately, that's kind of how it's played out. I love when plans actually come together.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's amazing too that, I mean, obviously you guys believed in the concept. You believed in your team and your people. You put the right people in place. The thing that you couldn't predict, none of us could, was how long, right? So was there ever a point where you were like, I mean, this just keeps on getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back? Or like you said, with challenge is opportunity, where you're using those 2 years, which was a much longer period of time than most people thought, to say, all right, we've got a couple locations. What can we learn from it? So when we get into this expansive growth mode, we're putting in a better experience than we could have if we hadn't taken that time.
So, yes. I mean, it's a lot of those things, right? Like, one is how can you, again, we can't predict. When are we going to be able to reopen? I mean, you know, we had 3 locations in London. You know, we closed in March. We reopened in August. They closed us in the 1st of November. Then they wanted to be open for Christmas, so they reopened for 2 weeks. And then they closed back down just before Christmas. And then we were closed for 5 months.
Wow.
And we couldn't reopen until May of 2021. Okay? Wow. So because those things were out of our control and totally unpredictable, it was really trying to set up the systems so that we could open and close pretty quickly.
Right.
Again, that caring deeply philosophy of what we had helped us because we kept so much of our team together at those venues. So, you know, we didn't have to go out and hire, 100 people when we wanted to reopen because we didn't really lose very many, right? All of those things kind of were important. The other thing that was hugely helpful to us is the economic model in which we actually operate. Because we have a a really good balance between the game side and the food and beverage side, et cetera, it created a situation where when we reopened, like, again, we didn't know, were people going to come back? Well, so when we reopened our venues, we had food restrictions, right? You had, you can't have more than 6 people at a table. You have to have them 6 feet apart. So all of those things, that was all uncharted territory. And we're like, okay, well, how much revenue do we have to generate in order to actually break even? And most of our competitive set, we're generating on the higher end 50 to 60% of their pre-pandemic revenue. When we reopened, we were profitable in 72 hours.
Wow.
And the first month, we actually we're on 100% of what we did on prior year.
Wow.
Now, part of that was because the game is so compelling, we had a revenue shift, right? Sure. So if we were doing 45% of our revenue on the game side, we were now doing 60%, right? Because there were restrictions on the food and beverage side, right? But if you typically only generate 15% of your revenue from the activity, then you can't compensate that for the loss on the food and beverage side. So the fundamental kind of economic model that we operate on was a strength for us. But then you had to be able to be flexible and pivot. So first it was, okay, no more than, 6 people within a group or 8 people within a group, right? Then in London, what they said is, okay, but they have to be from the same household, right? So it can't be friends getting together. It can only be family.
Wow.
And then culturally there, pubs are really a big thing, right? So they had when the pubs reopened, they had all these people spilling out into the streets. So then they said, well, you can only serve alcohol if you're seated. Well, we serve drinks on our course when you're playing the game. So it wasn't designed for us, but it impacted us.
Right.
So now we can no longer serve drinks on the course. Right. So literally every week there was another thing that your team had to be prepared to immediately address and go. And again, it comes back to we're very fortunate. We have a great team. Yeah. Right. So they were able to lead the way and really execute in a very dynamic kind of environment at the time. At the same time, the senior team was like, okay, let's look ahead, right? How do we manage the day-to-day, but not lose sight of what our 5-year plan was to begin with? And okay, great, this shifted it, but how do we make sure that we don't get too far off course and we can kind of bring it back? And if there's changes we need to make because the environment is entirely changed, what is that? What does that look like? And how do we plan for it today so that we can capitalize when life becomes more normal again?
Right. Yeah, you talk about the game of mini golf in general and how you've innovated on that game. You've used technology. You've talked about your culture and the guest experience. Is innovation kind of fundamental to navigating change and challenge as well? Because that's some of just looking at it creatively, right? Thinking differently. How do we turn this into something that we can actually learn from and apply maybe beyond this specific point in time, right?
Yeah. So innovation for us, again, it's part of those culture things that we said, right? So while we talk about the block as not, we don't specifically say technology, like each one of those components have something underneath it, right? So leading the way and owning the fun, right? Those are part of the things that drive, kind of our culture of innovation. So we have a dedicated R&D team that focuses on continuing to improve our game. So we have this great game.
Yeah.
But again, part of our challenge is how do we always continue to make things better, whether it's the guest experience, whether it's food and beverage, and on the game side, it's no different. Now, an inherent advantage we have is when you typically would think about miniature golf, okay, well, I've got this miniature golf course, so the only way I can refresh it and change it is to change the hole, right? Now, there's some of those things that we do, right, that we look at how do we create this. So we have like 4 standard kind of layouts that we try to design all of the holes around so that we can refresh in a more efficient way. So as an example, we could take the top off of our beer pong hole and we can turn it into a foosball hole in essentially 24 hours.
That's cool.
Okay. Yeah. So those are kind of design elements in the way we fundamentally create new holes that we say, okay, if we keep this kind of pattern, that will allow us to refresh. What really excites me is so much of our game is technology driven and software driven. So we can create new games, we can enhance games, we can create more competitive ways or more family friendly ways to play using the software itself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you can come and play Puttshack as a family and say, okay, we're here to, just have a fun family night out. We can create the game for corporate events where it's tailored to a team building theme, as an example. Right. So we have a hole that's a pop the question hole. So you'll get a true false question that comes up on your screen. And if you think the answer is true, you'll putt under a bridge that says true. If you think it's false, you putt under a bridge that says false. Yeah, if you get it right, you get bonus points. If you get it wrong, you lose points, right? Now we can create that for a corporate event, right? They can ask questions about the company or ask questions on a training that, if they're trying to train people, right? So we can do that just with the technology. We don't physically have to change anything within the venue to do that.
That's cool. Yeah, so obviously there's some logistics or operational ways that you've made the physical experience something that's agile and versatile, but really with technology and software, it can be changed or personalized instantly. Yeah, I love that. We see the same thing in space, like in a physical workspace, there's some elements that you want to incorporate some sort of movability or flexibility into from a furniture solution perspective or from physical branding on the walls, but using technology, you can enhance that and make it even more personal or more quick to change, which is really cool. Yep. Yeah, I love that. Well, you've really piqued my interest on Puttshack. I can't wait to get out there and try it out myself. I like to ask all our guests on the show a couple personal questions, if you don't mind, to finish off the conversation. And the first is, let's look at the year ahead. Okay. And this could be a Puttshack thing or just a Joe thing, but what's something you're looking forward to in the next 12 months?
So in the next 12 months, we're working on opening 7 locations at Puttshack.
Wow.
Right. So now is the time we're kind of transitioning into that true growth stage. That can we replicate the culture? Can we, we're talking each venue is 25,000 square feet. And each venue has about 175 associates and 12 to 14 managers. So they're big operations individually, right? So what excites me is watching the team come together to make sure that foundation is in place so that we are scaling and opening. And by the time we finish that 7th opening over the next 12 months, our goal is to be on pace that we're opening a new venue about every 30 days, right? So that by itself is exciting. The other thing that I'm excited is to watch our team grow and develop, right? So we are adding new people at our central team to be supporting all of the venues. This past week we announced 3 promotions from people either within the central team or from the venues, for new venues that are opening. So I always get excited to watch people grow professionally because that's a part of what we should be doing as a senior management team, is setting the environment so that people can actually continue to develop their careers, and we as a company are growing such that they don't leave because they now have better skill sets. We get the benefit of that because we can promote them into another opportunity within Puttshack.
It's awesome. You're going to be a busy man. How about a resource? You've had a lot of success throughout your career. Is there a resource that's been valuable to you that you could recommend to others?
Sure. Personally, what I focus, there's a lot of great books out there, right? And I wish I had more time to read a lot of them. But what I have found valuable in my career is really finding mentors, right? And it's really of every part of my life, right? So I was blessed early on with my kind of the first time I had the opportunity to lead a division within a company. They hooked me up with a mentor and who was invaluable. And I really kind of got the benefit of that. And so as I moved forward, I looked for those opportunities to have mentors within my professional career. Mm-hmm. But then I also realized, okay, well, you know, doing what I'm doing and kind of going through that, there's a lot to balance in your life, right? I mean, I can have a great career, but then destroy my home life because I don't have good balance.
Right.
So what I found is it was really valuable to find mentors on my personal life as well, right? So whatever is important to you, right? So to help you continue on your journey and grow, not just professionally, but that the personal side of you grows as well, right? Faith for me is very important. So having somebody that, you know, walked alongside me as my professional career grew so that I could also make sure that things that were important to me, like humility and my family and balance and stuff, that I didn't lose sight of those things, right? And have a successful career, but an unsuccessful personal life.
Sure.
I found, you know, books, videos, and that are all great. But people who already have a lot of wisdom that you can gain from, I found hugely valuable. I have this saying that I say to our team a lot, like, wisdom is one of those things that you too often get about 10 minutes after you really needed it, right? Because I've just made a big mistake, right? I wish I knew it. And it's impossible to know everything, right? It's impossible to know everything that you need to know. So I surround myself with talented people who I can learn from, who are better at a lot of things that I'm not good at. And then you let them do their job. And then find mentors that can also help me who have a lot of wisdom, because it's impossible to gain everything but by experience.
Sure.
So if I can learn from others to help avoid mistakes because I've gained some of what they said, that has been hugely valuable in my career.
It's great advice. And back to that balance, the importance of balance, right? Are you a mentor to others?
As I get older now, the answer is yes. I spend a lot of time both with some of the younger people on our team that are really talented. I mean, our executive team continuously, but there's also some, you know, another tier of talent that I try to mentor as best I can. I spend time mentoring other CEOs actually within our space because I'm not really overly concerned about competition. I think the better we can make our space, the better it is. So, and I enjoy that because, again, if I can help others avoid mistakes from some of those that I've made along my past 25 years, then I feel I have an obligation to try to share that and do that.
I love that. So let's say you weren't opening 7 new locations, and then after that, one every 30 days, and you were retiring tomorrow. What's some words of wisdom that you'd leave with those who you were mentoring?
I would say surround yourself with really talented people, right? And listen to them, right? So I think one of the things that's important to do that most people don't do because it breaks outside their comfort zone is to surround yourself as you gain more and more responsibility, right? Surround yourself with people who think differently than you, because you will get all the perspectives you need for collectively making the best strategic decisions. Most of us want to surround ourselves with people who are similar to us because we make our friends that way, right? I mean, it's just kind of the way that we're naturally wired.
Right.
But in growing a business and creating the best business, you need the different perspectives. And it's uncomfortable a lot of times because that means that when you say, hey, what should we do? And as long as people are telling you what they really believe, you're going to get different perspectives. Right. What I have found over my career is you can take all those different perspectives, right? You have a team who gets along well and doesn't take those different viewpoints personally. 8 out of 10 times, once you talk through it, you end up with agreement of what's the best strategy, not what was my strategy or what was somebody else's idea of the right strategy. You come up with collectively the best strategy. And then the other 2 times, my role as CEO is to go, okay, well, this is the direction we're going.
Right.
That would be one of the things that I would encourage people who are kind of growing in their career and they want to do that is, surround yourself with talent, but also have people who have different viewpoints and listen to them.
Yeah. It's great advice. This has been a fascinating conversation, Joe.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited for everything that you've got ahead and looking forward to following you. And there's a Puttshack close by, so I'm heading there. And sounds like there might be one close by people listening too with your expansion plan. So thanks again, Joe. This has been great.
Thanks, Drew.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.